I'll just say you're dead. It's easier. That's the last thing she said before hanging up. Not goodbye, not I love you, but not even please don't come. Just that. Cold. Polished. Like she'd practiced it. And I guess she had, because by the time I pulled into the university parking lot, I already knew I wasn't getting out of the truck. I just sat there, hands still on the steering wheel, watching through the windshield as cap and gown kids posed with their parents on the stairs. A few rows ahead of me, her mother climbed out of a rented black SUV in a cream blazer, and there he was, Mr. Country Club, third husband, the one who understood her career, the one who apparently photographed better. Rachel walked up to them in her gown, laughing, tossed her arms around her mother, then him, then all three turned and smiled for a camera someone handed off. There it was, the family portrait, polished, practiced, perfect, except for the part where I was dead. I didn't leave right away. I stayed through the whole ceremony, just far enough from the crowd that I could hear the microphone echo off the cement walls, but not the words. I watched her take the stage, shake the dean's hand, flip her tassel, hug her mother again. She never looked back. Later that night, I saw the photos go up on her feed. Grateful for everyone who supported me along the way, she'd captioned one. In another, her arm was linked through the stepfathers. Couldn't have done it without this guy. Sure, kid. Why not rewrite the whole script while you're at it? I didn't comment, didn't text, didn't call. What would I say? Hey, nice graduation, shame I had to die for it? Instead, I opened my drawer and pulled out the binder, leather-bound, heavy, a stupid Father's Day gift she gave me when she was 12. So you can write all your stories, she said. I guess that's what I've been doing all these years. I flipped to the next blank page and started writing. I sat in the parking lot. I saw you laugh. I saw you beam. And I saw myself, missing. You're not a bad person, Rachel, just rehearsed, polished, like your mother taught you to be. Folded it once, slid it into a plastic sleeve, dated the tab, graduation. I never planned on sending it, just like the rest of them. Letters from prom night, from her first breakup, from when her dog died and she called her mother, not me. All of them sealed in ink, never mailed. I wasn't trying to guilt her. Hell, I wasn't trying to reach her. I just didn't want to forget who I was, watching her forget who I'd been. You'd be surprised how many people stumble on these stories without ever subscribing. Over 97% listen without hitting that little button, and I get it, I do. But if any part of this hits you, sticks with you, or reminds you of someone you used to be or someone you lost along the way, consider subscribing. It helps the team bring more of these to life. More stories that don't fit the Hallmark card version of life. Anyway, that binder stayed in the drawer. Years passed. Birthdays came and went. She posted new jobs, a new apartment, then engaged. Her fiancé showed up in a picture one day, holding a tiny rescue dog. Built something beautiful together, she captioned it. Still no call, no invite, no mention. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I wrote one more letter. Just 4 words this time. I hope he's kind. This time, though, I added something different, something I hadn't done in years. I typed a label, her name, her full address. Then I slid it into the binder's inside flap. I didn't know why. Maybe I was tired of being invisible in a story I helped write. Maybe I wanted to know the mailman still remembered the name on her street. Or maybe, just maybe, I was done pretending my silence didn't weigh anything. Because silence can be heavy, and I think she was about to learn just how heavy mine could get. The funny thing about silence is how loud it gets when you stop expecting it to end. After graduation day, Rachel didn't reach out. Not a text, not a holiday card, not even one of those mass Merry Christmas from all of us emails she used to send back when she still pretended we were part of the same us. I'd check the mailbox in the mornings, more out of habit than hope. Junk mail, oil change coupons, credit card offers. Nothing with her handwriting, nothing at all. Her mother did call once, left a voicemail about getting promoted, VP of something at some firm with a meaningless name. I thought you should know, she said, like it was a family achievement, like we were still on the same team. I didn't call back. Instead, I fixed the latch on the shed door, restrung my fishing rods, found the old radio she used to play when she was a teenager and cleaned the corrosion off the battery terminals. It still worked, barely. Same scratchy static, same soft jazz, same ghost of a memory in the corner of the room. Then, sometime in the early fall, I saw the post. It came out of nowhere. A picture of Rachel's left hand, palm up, with a diamond sitting proud and sharp against her ring finger. Captioned, of course. He asked. I said yes. The comment section bloomed like weeds, heart emojis. "You deserve it, girl," her mother gushed. "We are so proud of you both." We, as if I'd been consulted, as if I'd been counted. I read the comments in full, all 132 of them, scanned for a single one that might have hinted at me. "Your dad must be over the moon," or "Hope he walks you down the aisle." Nothing, not even the lie. So I closed the browser, and I walked to the drawer. That same binder still sat inside, a little heavier now. I pulled it out, flipped past the old letters, the college ones, the heartbreak ones, the Christmas ones she never answered. I found the last entry, graduation, and I added a new one beneath it, engagement. I didn't ramble this time, didn't pour my heart out. I just wrote 4 words in block letters, steady and tight. "I hope he's kind." And then I stared at the space below it, blank, waiting. For the first time, I reached for the label maker in the junk drawer, punched in her name, her new address. I'd found it through the alumni database years ago, not that I ever used it. I printed the label, peeled it, stuck it to the inside cover of the binder, just in case she ever asked herself, why didn't he fight harder? I'd stopped fighting the day she made it clear that love, to her, was a PR problem, that a father who didn't fit the narrative could be edited out like an outdated photo. But hope's not the same as fighting. It doesn't roar, it just waits, patient and pathetic. So I waited. She didn't write. But a week later, I got a package in the mail. Not from her, from an old mutual friend, someone from our church days. Inside was a thin envelope and a photo. The envelope held a printed wedding announcement, not an invite, just a formal card like a press release. Elegant font, cream paper. Together with their families, except of course not all families. The photo was worse. Engagement shoot. Him standing behind her, arms around her waist, her laughing up at him like they'd just discovered love itself. But what got me wasn't the pose, it was the dog in her lap. Max, my dog. The dog I gave her when she was 13, when she couldn't sleep through thunderstorms, when she needed something soft to hug through the fights her mother and I used to have, the one she begged me not to put down when he got sick, but then never visited once during chemo. And now, here he was, in a bow tie, next to a man I'd never met. I didn't cry. I didn't call. I just added a page to the binder, a printed copy of the wedding announcement, and beneath it, in my own handwriting, I added a note. Even ghosts get mail sometimes. Then I went outside and fed the birds. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. No signature, no sender, just a plain manila rectangle slid under the door by a sleepy postal carrier who barely knocked. Rachel found it after yoga, still in leggings, water bottle tucked under one arm, scrolling through emails with the other. At first she thought it was from one of the vendors, or maybe her mom. She'd been pushing hard for handwritten menus and silk napkin rings, but when she opened it, something shifted. Inside was a single item, a dark leather binder. No wrapping, no ribbon, not even a post-it. Just the binder, thick and oddly familiar. Her name wasn't even on the cover, but when she opened it, page 1 said everything. May 9th, 2012. That was the day she got her acceptance letter to college. She read the first letter slowly, eyes moving faster than her heart. It started like this. You were standing at the kitchen counter in your slippers. You didn't think I noticed the way your hands shook while you opened the envelope. You turned it over 3 times before finally tearing the flap. And then you screamed, you danced, you cried, and you looked at me and said, I did it, Dad. You did. Rachel sat down without realizing it. Her knees had just stopped cooperating. She turned the page. September 3rd, 2012. Move-in day. A letter about how quiet the house felt without her. About Max sleeping by the door. About missing her humming in the shower. November 24th, 2013. Thanksgiving break she skipped. I made your favorite sweet potatoes anyway. June 18th, 2015. Her breakup with Matt. I didn't say anything when you told me. I just listened. You didn't know I was proud of you for walking away from someone who didn't see your worth. The pages kept going. Some were 2 lines long, others full paragraphs. They weren't desperate or pleading, just present. Like he'd found a way to keep showing up, even after she told him not to. And then she got to it. May 17th, 2018, graduation day. She stared at the heading for a full minute before she dared read. Her thumb brushed the edge of the page like it might burn. I watched from the parking lot. You were radiant. You didn't see me. That's okay. I'm proud of you, even if I'm dead to you now. Rachel dropped the binder. Not out of shock, out of shame. She picked it up a second later, brushing the cover like an apology. though she didn't say a word aloud. She never mentioned the envelope to her fiancé, not that night, not the next. When he came home, she said she'd been looking at old photos, which wasn't a lie, technically. He kissed her temple and asked if she wanted Thai for dinner. She said sure, and never brought it up again. But the binder didn't go back in the envelope. It didn't go on a shelf or under the bed. It sat on her nightstand, next to the bridal magazines and the scented lotion and the framed picture of her and her fiancé at a vineyard in Napa. It stayed there like it belonged, like maybe, just maybe, a part of her wasn't done pretending her father didn't exist. At night, when she turned the lamp off, sometimes her hand would drift to it, just rest on the cover. No reason, no movement, like holding something you didn't know you missed until it came back without asking. She didn't know why it hit her so hard. She hadn't thought about her father in years, not seriously, not outside the casual, he's not in the picture line she threw out to strangers when the topic came up. But there was something different about seeing it all in his words, his language, his silence, all the things he'd never said, until now. There was no return address. She didn't ask her mother, didn't want to hear the spin, and deep down, she suspected her mother had no idea it existed. The next morning, she changed the seating chart, moved her stepfather from father of the bride to family escort. She told the planner it was a formatting thing. That night, she read 3 more letters, and for the first time since she was 17, she cried without knowing who she was angry at anymore. The binder had lived on Rachel's nightstand for weeks without incident, untouched during bridal brunches, floral appointments, dress fittings. She'd convinced herself it wasn't a secret, just private, like an old diary or a keepsake box, something from another version of her life. Then her mother found it. She hadn't meant to leave it out. It was just one of those hectic mornings, early call with the caterer, 2 missed texts from the photographer, a migraine already brewing behind her left eye. She'd been in the shower when her mother wandered in, looking for an aspirin. That was the story anyway, and maybe it was true. But when Rachel came out, hair wet, towel around her, her mother was standing at the edge of the bed, binder in hand, jaw tight. "What is this?" Rachel froze. "Give that back." "Where did it come from?" her mother asked, flipping through pages like they were evidence in a trial. "Did he send this?" "Of course he did. God, he always pulls this martyr crap when he's backed into a corner." "He didn't write them now," Rachel said. "They're dated." "Oh, please, dated by him," her mother snapped, eyes scanning another page. "He always did love playing the quiet victim, always made himself look like the noble one, writing letters instead of showing up. Manipulative, that's what this is." Rachel took a step forward and held out her hand. "Give it back." Her mother stared at her for a long moment, then let the binder drop onto the bed like it was radioactive. "I don't know why you're letting this derail everything," she said. "You have a wedding in 6 weeks. You don't need his guilt trip clouding your head." Rachel didn't answer, just picked up the binder and walked it silently into the guest room, locking the door behind her. She sat on the floor with it in her lap, open to the same page she kept returning to. "I'm proud of you, even if I'm dead to you now." She traced the line with her thumb, not because it comforted her, but because it hurt, in a way that didn't feel manipulative, in a way that felt earned. The next day she called her uncle. He was her dad's brother. Not close, not exactly estranged either, just one of those relatives who drifted to the edges after the divorce. Retired now, used to be a family attorney, the kind who kept paper trails for everything. "Hi, Uncle Dave," she said, trying to sound casual. "Quick question. Do you happen to know how my dad handled the tuition stuff?" He paused. "You mean your college payments?" "Yeah, I always thought Mom paid for most of it, and he just sent a check when she asked." A long breath. "No, Rach, not even close. He paid the school directly, in full, every semester, in your name." She blinked. "Wait, what?" "He wanted to make sure you'd never get tied up in his taxes or her claims, said it was the one thing he could give you cleanly. He didn't even want reimbursement credit on the divorce filings. I have the documents if you want them." Rachel didn't say anything for a few seconds, just stood there, staring at the engagement photo on her fridge. Her mother had framed it last month. "Hello?" Uncle Dave asked. "I'm here." "You okay?" "Yeah, that's not what I was told." He didn't reply. She thanked him, hung up, and sat at the table in silence. Her mother had always said Alan dipped in and out when it was convenient, that he stopped paying once he found out Rachel wasn't going to law school, that he used money to control, to guilt, to play the long game. And she believed it. Why wouldn't she? Now she knew. He hadn't used money to control. He'd used silence, quiet gestures, invisible threads. He'd never asked for a thank you, never demanded a visit. He just wrote letters and paid the bills. Rachel didn't confront her mother, not that day, not even that week. She didn't ask about the years of lies or the rehearsed sympathy or the vilification. What would have been the point? The woman had already spun a lifetime of narrative around Alan's absence, and worse, around her own sanctified role in replacing him. But something shifted, and not subtly. Rachel began rewriting the vows she'd planned with her fiancé, pulled back on the parts about chosen family and those who were always there. Deleted the line her mother had helped her craft about being raised by a woman strong enough to be both parents. She left in a single line about honesty. Then she moved the binder into her suitcase, and for the first time, she began to wonder how much of her life had been lived through borrowed eyes. 2 days before the wedding, she sat on the floor of her living room, surrounded by stacks of programs, folding each one with a mechanical kind of care. Her fiancé was in the next room, on a call with the DJ, arguing about some last-minute playlist changes. Rachel wasn't listening. Her focus was on a single line she hadn't included yet, had avoided, really. The part about the memorial walk. Most brides didn't need one. She wasn't grieving anyone in the usual sense. Her grandparents had passed when she was young. A distant cousin, maybe. No one close. But the planner had asked, "Do you want to include an acknowledgement, even a general one? Sometimes it helps. Emotionally." Emotionally. She stared at the page like it had personally insulted her. Then she grabbed a pen and scrawled the words in the margin. More instinct than plan. In honor of those who couldn't attend. That was it. No names, no stories. But it was the first time she didn't lie. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't even forgiveness. But it was honest. And that was new. She told herself she added it for herself. That it wasn't about him. Not entirely. But after the 50th fold, she set the pen down and picked up her phone. The screen was blank. No recent calls, no missed texts from him. Just her own reflection in the black glass, tired, unsure, hollow. She scrolled to his name. It was still saved as Dad. Not Alan, not Bio, just Dad. Her thumb hovered. Then she hit call. 3 rings, 4, voicemail. She didn't leave one. Just stared at the blinking screen for a moment, then hung up. Waited. Nothing. Not even a missed call notification. So she texted, "I'm sorry for what I said. I wish you'd come." Simple, soft, almost cowardly in its brevity. She stared at the screen for the next 5 minutes, watching the delivered status sit there like a wall between them. It never turned to read. The binder was in her suitcase already, tucked between her wedding heels and the emergency sewing kit. She'd flipped through it again that morning. Not every page, just enough to remember the tone of his voice in her head. It had taken years for that sound to fade, and just a few quiet pages to bring it back. She didn't know what she expected. She hadn't earned a seat, hadn't earned a walk down the aisle. But she thought maybe if she said it first, if she acknowledged it, that horrible thing she said at graduation, that he was dead to her, maybe that would be enough. Maybe he'd forgive the death she handed him. But Alan didn't reply. He didn't call. He didn't text back. He didn't send a thumbs-up emoji or a period or even a typo she could overanalyze into meaning. What she didn't know, what she would never know until much later, was that he had seen it. Alan had been standing in his workshop when the text buzzed in. His phone, old and scuffed, barely lit up in the sunlight. He wiped his hands on a rag before picking it up, read the message once, then again, then locked the screen. He didn't delete it. He didn't block her. He didn't show it to anyone. He just stood there holding the phone like it weighed 100 pounds. It wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't even anger. It was something colder, something deeper. The message came too late to be the first word in a conversation, and too early to be a goodbye. So he did what he always did when the words didn't come out right. He wrote, sat down at his bench, flipped to the final page in the binder, and started to craft a reply he wouldn't send, not yet. He folded the paper once, slid it into a plastic sleeve, and dated it. Then he printed a copy of her text, highlighted one line, "I wish you'd come," and beneath it, in his own handwriting, added, "Some invitations are written in ink, some are carved in absence." Then he placed it gently into a plain white envelope. No card, no note, just the page. He looked at the return address section, left it blank. Later that night, Rachel turned her phone face down on the nightstand, pretending she wasn't still waiting for the screen to light up. She rehearsed her vows out loud once, then again, but the line that kept echoing wasn't in them. It was one sentence typed by trembling thumbs, floating forever in digital silence. I'm sorry for what I said. Alan woke up before the sun, the way men his age often do, not from dreams or alarms, but from something quieter, a kind of knowing, a gut-level click that said, this is the day. He sat on the edge of the bed, feet flat on the floor, letting the stiffness in his knees speak before he did. The house around him was still, as always. No coffee brewing, no dog padding down the hall, just him in the binder, still closed in the drawer where it had lived for years. He didn't shower, didn't shave, didn't iron a shirt. There was no tie laid out, no jacket slung over the door. He made toast, plain, ate it standing up in the kitchen with the door open, letting the cold air wrap around his ankles like a warning. Then, quietly, without ceremony, he walked to the study and pulled open the drawer. The binder looked the same as always, worn, softened at the edges, but heavier now, not physically maybe, spiritually, like it carried the full weight of every word he'd never said, every dinner he hadn't been invited to, every apology he'd whispered into his steering wheel and never out loud. He sat down, placed the binder flat, and opened to the last used page, then reached for the printer paper he'd prepared the night before. It was her message, printed in full, nothing altered, just black ink on white paper. I'm sorry for what I said. I wish you'd come. No context, no punctuation edits, no annotations, just her words, frozen exactly as they appeared on the screen. He slid the page into a sleeve, tapped it flush, and inserted it behind the tab marked engagement. Then, something he hadn't done before, he reached for an envelope, not one of the cheap ones, a heavy one, the kind you'd send a check in if you were old school, stiff, clean, formal. Inside he placed a copy of the screenshot, no note, no signature, just her words, printed and still warm from the inkjet. On the outside of the envelope, he wrote the name of the hotel, room number 604, the bridal suite. He had it because her mother had posted it weeks ago in a group message chain he hadn't been removed from, an oversight probably, one of the few. She'd wanted guests to know where to send gifts and champagne flutes and tacky little Mr. and Mrs. pillows. Alan had filed it away without knowing why. Now he knew. At 7:12 a.m., he drove to the post office. The woman at the counter barely looked up from her screen. Morning, he said. Hi there, she replied, eyeing the envelope. Need tracking? No, he said. Just overnight delivery. She punched in the zip code, printed the sticker, sealed the fate. Destination's a hotel, she noted, glancing at the label. Wedding? Alan nodded once. Sort of. The printer hummed. The receipt slid out. Should get there before 2 p.m., she said. He didn't answer. He just took the slip and walked out. By the time Rachel received the envelope, she'd be surrounded by women with brushes and mascara wands, a photographer capturing the glow, lipstick tests, laughter, perfume clouds. The envelope would arrive without ceremony, handed to the concierge, who'd pass it to the maid, who'd place it on the marble counter by the champagne bucket. Rachel wouldn't notice it right away, but eventually, she'd see her name in his handwriting. Simple, sharp, quietly impossible to ignore. It would interrupt nothing and everything. He didn't expect a call, didn't expect redemption. This wasn't revenge, not really. It was a boundary, delivered by courier. He drove home, opened the windows, let the air in, put on the radio and cleaned his tools, same as every weekend. But for the first time in years, the drawer was empty. And somehow, the silence that filled the room didn't feel like absence. It felt like punctuation. It arrived during the lipstick debate. Rachel was sitting near the vanity in a silk robe, hair in soft waves, half smiling at her reflection while one bridesmaid argued for matte crimson and another for a glossier nude. The photographer was clicking away, capturing the candid chaos every wedding album needs, curling irons, champagne, laughter. Then came the soft knock on the suite door. Delivery for Rachel Kingsley, said a voice, low and polite. The planner opened it. A man in a hotel uniform handed over a plain white envelope. No card, no box, no flowers, just that. She turned, puzzled, and passed it to Rachel. Looks personal. Rachel took it without thinking. Her fingers recognized the handwriting before her brain did. Simple, sharp, deliberate. Her stomach tensed. She stood quickly, murmured, "Give me a minute," and slipped into the bathroom before anyone could object. She locked the door. The mirror in front of her was lit by vanity bulbs, casting halos on her cheekbones. She stared at her own eyes as she peeled the envelope open. Inside, a single sheet of printer paper, her own text. I'm sorry for what I said. I wish you'd come. She blinked, once, twice, then flipped it over. There, taped beneath it, was a smaller square of paper, crooked, rough around the edges. His handwriting again, starker this time. You asked me not to come. I listened. This time I'm letting my absence speak. That was all. No rage, no guilt tripping. Just a sentence, balanced perfectly between finality and restraint. It hit like a gut punch laced with something quieter, something ancient. She sat on the closed toilet lid and stared at it. Outside the bathroom, her bridesmaids kept chattering, but inside, time stopped. Because it wasn't just a message, it was a reflection, a mirror held up to the part of herself she'd worked hard to airbrush, the version she'd convinced everyone didn't exist. The girl who'd said, "I'll just say you're dead. It's easier." Rachel folded the page once, set it on the counter. She tried to cry, but the tears got stuck somewhere behind her ribs. It wasn't grief, it wasn't loss, it was recognition. He hadn't made a scene, he hadn't posted anything online, he hadn't begged to be included. He'd just sent silence, wrapped in her own words, echoed back. She stayed in that bathroom for 20 minutes. Her mother knocked once. "Rachel, everything okay?" No answer. A moment later, "Don't tell me it's the lipstick again." Still no answer. Inside, Rachel sat perfectly still, the envelope on her lap. She thought about the binder, about the letters, about the tuition her mother swore she'd paid alone, about the dog that used to sleep by her feet when she cried herself to sleep over boys her father never judged. She thought about the first time she ever lied to protect an image, and how it had felt easier, until now. Eventually, she stood, washed her hands even though they weren't dirty, took one last look in the mirror, then walked out into the suite and smiled. She even joked with her friends, posed for the camera, laughed when someone tripped on a curling iron cord. But something had cracked. Not her face, not her composure. Something deeper, internal, not broken, revealed. She didn't tell anyone what was in the envelope, didn't show her fiancé, didn't even mention it to her mother, who was now fussing with the bouquet order and muttering about peonies. But when the planner asked if she still wanted to go ahead with the "in honor of those who couldn't attend" line in the program, Rachel said yes, then added softly, "Don't remove it, just let it breathe." Her voice didn't shake, but her fingers did, just enough for the makeup artist to notice. "Cold hands," she said cheerfully. "Sign of a warm heart." Rachel didn't reply, because her hands weren't cold. They were remembering something. A man in a truck, watching from the parking lot, saying nothing, and still loving her anyway. The ceremony went on, as weddings do, with all the hollow beauty of a well-rehearsed play. People clapped, champagne was poured, vows were exchanged under string lights that flickered just enough to feel intentional. Rachel looked radiant to everyone watching, from the mother of the groom dabbing her eyes in the front row to the distant cousins craning for Instagram angles near the back. Her dress shimmered, her veil floated, her laugh still sounded like it used to, but something was different, not on the surface, beneath it. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She recited her vows but didn't linger on the words. The thank yous during the reception were quick, almost mechanical. She handed the mic back to the DJ faster than anyone expected. Her new husband, Derek, noticed it. He chalked it up to nerves. Big day, emotions. Maybe the champagne was making her spin a little. He squeezed her hand beneath the head table, smiling, and she squeezed back. But she wasn't really there, not the way she was supposed to be. She danced when expected, took the photos, even tossed the bouquet. But there was no picture posted afterward, no gushing caption, not a single story upload. Rachel Kingsley, who once journaled her lunch salads, didn't post a single frame from her own wedding. Later, the guests filtered out, some tipsy, others sentimental. Her mother hugged her tightly in the lobby, saying, "You were perfect, baby, just like I always imagined." Rachel nodded, smiled, kissed her cheek, but her eyes were already moving toward the elevator. Room 604, the bridal suite. She closed the door behind her and kicked off her shoes with a tired thud. Derek was still downstairs saying goodbye to his frat brothers and trying to find his tie. Rachel walked across the room, pulled open her suitcase, and took out the binder. She sat cross-legged on the carpet in her wedding dress and opened it to the first page. The words were soft and plain, dated, solid. They didn't beg for attention. They didn't demand understanding. They simply waited to be read, like they always had. She flipped through pages she hadn't seen yet. Some she had skimmed before. Others were new. There was one from the day she left for her college internship. Her mother had framed that summer as a huge sacrifice, But Alan had written a 2-line letter that said, "You'll learn more by leaving than staying. I just hope you come back curious." She hadn't remembered that internship for years, but now the smell of that city came back, the cold bus rides, the paper cups of coffee, the phone calls she never answered when her dad tried to check in. She didn't cry, but she didn't breathe much either. The door opened a little after midnight. Derek walked in, loosened his tie, saw her sitting there. "You okay?" Rachel looked up. Her eyes were clearer than they'd been all day. "Yeah." He glanced at the binder, frowning. "What's that?" She closed it slowly. "My father's handwriting." He hesitated. "You never really talk about him." "I know," she said. Then, after a long pause, added, "He was never gone. I just stopped looking." Derek didn't know what to say to that. He nodded and started to change. Rachel stayed on the floor, her dress pooled around her like a ghost she couldn't shake. In the next room, her phone buzzed with tagged photos and congratulations. She didn't touch it. Down the hall, her mother lay awake in bed, scrolling through pictures from the night, replaying the moments. Then, just before setting her phone down, she remembered that sentence, the one she heard through the bridal suite door while pretending not to linger. He was never gone. I just stopped looking. It hit her like a slap she never saw coming, because she knew exactly what Rachel had found. She hadn't asked, but she knew. She didn't sleep. Not because she was angry, not because she was scared, but because something ancient and ugly had finally cracked open. And the sound of that silence, her daughter sitting cross-legged in a white dress, reading the one man she had erased, was louder than anything she'd heard in years. Alan was already up when the first call came in. The kettle hadn't even finished boiling. Morning light spilled across the kitchen table, glinting off the handle of his favorite mug. #1 Dad, a cheap ceramic relic from Rachel's elementary school years. He never used it. Too fragile. But he left it on the shelf like a joke no one else got. The phone buzzed once, then again, then again. He ignored it. Let it rattle against the counter, face down. Then the text started. "Hey man, where were you yesterday? They told me you'd passed away? That can't be right. Just checking in, you okay? Didn't want to bring it up at the wedding, but..." People were confused. Thought you were gone. The names were familiar. Rachel's uncle, a cousin he hadn't seen in years. Even the groom's father who'd met Alan once, at a Christmas party in 2010 and had apparently remembered enough to ask where he'd been. Alan didn't answer. He didn't pick up when the cousin called again. He didn't respond when her uncle left a voicemail asking, "Was it health stuff? I heard something vague from Elaine. You didn't pass, right?" He simply walked to the desk, opened the drawer. The binder was gone, of course, but he had prepared for this. Pulled open a folder in his email, drafts, inside one message, subject line, truth, attachment, a single photo, the first page of the binder, dated June 14th, 2013, Rachel's college acceptance day, his handwriting clear and careful, addressed simply, "To my daughter, Rachel." He attached it to a new message, no words, no explanation, and one by one, he forwarded it to each person who had texted, called, or left a voicemail. He didn't accompany it with a paragraph, didn't explain what they were looking at, didn't add a passive-aggressive line like, "Guess I'm not dead after all." He just sent the file. That was all it needed. The silence that followed was immediate. No follow-ups, no apologies, just read receipts. A few hours later, one cousin replied, "I didn't know." Alan didn't reply. Midday, another ping. "I think you handled it better than I would have." Still nothing from Alan. He made lunch, watched part of a baseball game on mute, listened to the birds fight over seeds on the back porch, thought briefly about fixing the loose step but decided against it. Around 3:14 p.m., a message from Rachel's uncle. That letter, she kept it? No answer. Then another one, seconds later. She read them all, didn't she? Alan read that one slowly, then closed the phone. In the living room, the shadows shifted on the carpet, stretching longer across the wood floor as the sun started its descent. He poured a fresh cup of coffee. Not in the #1 Dad mug, a plain chipped one, white and clean. He wasn't angry. He wasn't smug. If anything, he felt quiet. Satisfied, maybe. But not the kind you gloat about. He didn't want people to feel sorry. Didn't want them to change their minds. That wasn't the point. He hadn't sent the page to prove anything. He sent it because it existed. Because no one else had. Because for 10 years, he'd been writing a life someone else tried to delete. He didn't need Rachel to post about him. He didn't need the family to reframe him. He didn't need anyone to rewrite the story. He'd already written it himself, and apparently it had finally been read. It was early evening, the sky still bruised with a dying sun, when Alan heard the knock. Not a frantic one, not hesitant either, just a steady rhythm, 3 sharp raps against the screen door, the kind that doesn't ask permission, just announces I'm here. He opened it slowly. Rachel stood there, hair pulled back, no makeup, wearing a plain sweatshirt that swallowed her collarbones. In one hand, the binder. In the other, a cream-colored box wrapped in a thin ribbon. He recognized the wedding album style immediately, the kind photographers charge thousands for, the kind you keep on coffee tables you never use. She didn't say anything. Not hi, not can I come in? Just stepped past him and into the house, like the 20 years between now and her last visit hadn't built 1,000 invisible walls. She placed both items on the kitchen table, then sat. He watched her for a moment, watched her exhale like she'd been holding her breath since she was 19. Maybe she had. I lied, she said, voice hoarse. He didn't move. I said you were dead. I told people that. Told myself that. Her hands rested flat on the table, palms down. No ring on her finger today. I did it because I thought you'd embarrass me. You didn't fit. She didn't cry. But the only thing that embarrassed me was what I became. Alan still didn't speak. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, gaze unmoving. Rachel opened the wedding album, flipped to the middle, a 2-page spread of her and her new husband holding hands beneath twinkle lights. In the background, guests clapping, the illusion of joy sealed in gloss. She slid it across the table until it stopped near the edge, then opened the binder. She didn't explain, didn't reread anything aloud, just looked at the pages, as if seeing them differently now. She touched the edges like they might crumble if she wasn't careful. Did you mean it? She asked. The part where you said you were proud of me? He studied her face, not the one she showed to cameras or curated on social media, but the one she wore now, unfiltered, hollowed out in all the places pretense used to live. Instead of answering, he pushed himself off the frame and walked to the counter, poured 2 mugs of coffee, black, no sugar, no milk, just how she used to pretend she liked it when she was 15 and trying to act older. He set one down in front of her, then sat across the table and wrapped his hands around his own cup. Still no words. But he looked at her, not past her, not through her, at her. Rachel didn't need more than that. They sat in silence for a long while. The clock ticked. The house creaked in the way old houses do, like it was stretching, waking up to something it hadn't felt in years. Eventually, she reached for the binder again, opened to the graduation letter. I didn't even look for you that day, she whispered. And you were there. He took a sip, then nodded once. Not bitter, not dramatic, just fact. Rachel looked down. I've spent so much time trying to make other people comfortable with the version of me they wanted, and I erased the only person who never asked for a different one. He didn't nod that time. Didn't need to. She closed the binder gently, then closed the wedding album too. They sat, longer than most people would have tolerated. Long enough for the coffee to cool and the tension to drain out of her shoulders. No apologies, no grand reconciliation speech. Just the hum of the fridge, the tick of the second hand, and the weight of 2 people relearning how to be quiet together. At one point, she reached across the table and placed her hand on the binder, then looked up. Can I leave this here? Alan didn't answer. He just reached forward and pulled the binder toward his side of the table like it had never belonged anywhere else. Rachel smiled, a small, broken one, but real. Then she stood, took her coat from the chair, and walked to the door. Before she left, she paused. You didn't say anything this whole time. He raised his coffee slightly, as if to say, and yet here you are. She gave the smallest of nods, and walked out into the early dark. Alan sat there, the binder beside him, steam fading from the mug in front of her empty chair. He didn't need to chase her. She'd found her way home. Sometimes that's all a father needs to say,